if you are in a national biosafety authority, well, you have probably a website where you describe everything that your organization is doing. It's your face to society, part of your face. And press releases make also part of the same part, of the same face, of your visibility. What are then the requirements for a press release? Well, as I said, it has a certain formal character. So the format of the press release is important, and the content of the press release is key, is essential. And I come to both. The format, I will come to that later in this presentation. The format, it is in fact an easy, basic format. And sometimes your organization has already a standard format that you will apply. But the content is really crucial. As I said, the content should be newsworthy. You cannot bring old topics. It must be in the news. Or you bring the news as a new event. At the same time, as I said, the content, there is the aspect of accountability. You must be sure of what you are going to say in the press release, because you can expect questions from the public or from journalists or from policymakers or from anyone about your release. What is your organization doing? What are you meaning? It is very important. You are not to give redundant information in your press release, because if you look at the form, we are going to look at the format, well, it is at most one A4. What I handed out here was not a press release. A press release is a single A4, maximum 1.5. And all the information there is key. There is no redundant information. There is no jargon in it. This is the accessible language speaking of my first lecture. There are no long phrases. It must be accessible language. So I would like to do now with you, not a role play, we did it already yesterday, but a mental exercise. And I would like you to imagine yourself that you are a biosafety regulator who is working in a national biosafety agency in a country. And you are going to write a press release on yesterday's news event that was handed out yesterday. The news of the rats in Italy eating GMO maize and attracting cancer. So imagine you are in this position. And now we continue. Before you are going to write your press release, I would like you to answer 4 questions. Not now, but in your mind, reflecting on the topic. We are not going to do it, I just explain the procedure one normally is going to follow if he is going to write a good press release. So it starts by thinking about answering 4 questions. What is the key message that you want beforehand? Before you start writing, what is the key message that you want to present in your press release? What do you really want to say about the news of the GMOs eating rats? That's a question to answer. A second question to answer is, who is the target group you are? Who is the press release? Well, as I said, it is directed to journalists, to the press, or to the wider public. But the wider public, of course, is composed of many public groups. There are consumers, there are producers, there are citizens, there are companies, there are many public groups. But on the topic where you are on, which public group, are there perhaps activists? Try to form an idea about the persons and the public groups who are going to read your press release. That's the second question you are going to answer for yourself. Then the third one is, what do you want your target group? Perhaps you can identify a target group. It may be the lay public or at large. But what do you want them to gain from your message? Try to imagine what your message will do in their minds. How will they appreciate your message? And finally, what is in fact the objective of your message? Is it only informing or not? Is it perhaps reassuring? So these 4 questions are to answer before starting to write. But before answering the questions, I ask a second mental effort from you now, that is to step back and to reflect. This is entirely mental. And this is about framing your message. And framing, if you look, I looked in the dictionary this week, the definitions of framing. It can be to build or to construct, of course. It is also to conceive or to design. But here, the meaning that I would like to use is to arrange or to adjust for a purpose. And that is, this meaning applied to framing your message is try to give your message a load that reflects 3 underlying elements. And the 3 underlying elements are important. These are the core values of your organization. And the press release should reflect the core values of your organization. It should also reflect the nature of your target group, or the biggest group that is going to read the press release. And it is going to reflect the nature of your message. And I will go into these 3 underlying elements to give you a more precise idea. So you are still not yet answering your questions. You step back and you frame now the first issue, and that is that you are going to imagine your organization's core values. Perhaps your organization has a mission statement where they are formulated. If you are in National Biosafety Authority, perhaps trustworthiness is a core value of your organization. I don't know. But it may be so. Read information. Your organization wants perhaps be independent, unbiased. Probably the National Biosafety Authority is to serve the people's interest and not a company's interest. I know it is not everywhere the case. In Burkina Faso, the National Biosafety Authority is financed by Monsanto, but that is another thing. All these core values confer the authority of your organization, so they are extremely important. Of course, you cannot state them in your press release, but what I try to say is that your press release has to reflect these values in some way or another, in your formulations, in your stance towards the subject. So that is the first framing I would ask from you before answering your 4 questions. The second framing, as I said, is now about the nature of your target group. Which are the most important groups in society that you are going to address. Which are the constituent groups of society? Who are you going to address in the first place with your message? Try to to have an idea about this. Is it the citizens or lay public? Are you going to account for certain activist groups, perhaps? Or are you going to focus primarily on the consumers? Do you aim with your press release mainly the government or a given government body? Or is it merely to NGOs, civil society organizations? Or is it for the farmers, perhaps? Or to the industry? Everything is possible. Try to imagine for whom you are making the press release. That's the second framing. Now the third framing, so the second framing, you try to imagine the background, the worldview, and the mindset of the target public or the target public groups. That's the second framing. The third framing is about the nature of the message you are going to give in your press release. Perhaps, as in this case, the GM food fed rats in Italy, perhaps you want to clarify the stance of your organization about a given item. In this case, the news item at stake. Or perhaps you want to, through your press release, you want to bring out an advice, perhaps to the wider public, or to farmers' organizations, or to any public group, or is it perhaps to reassure on a given development? That can also apply to the news that came, the breaking news of yesterday, example. Or perhaps you want to warn for something. The wider public, perhaps there's a warn to make. There can be other, you can have other, you may have other things to bring in your message. Have other, perhaps you see other, another nature of your message. So that is the third framing I would like to ask. And if you have made these three framings, so still the third one, try to imagine how to adjust the content of your message to the target group or the target groups. How you are going to phrase your press release in such a way that your target group will comprehend it. That's the third framing. And now you are done framing. But all this framing is a mental exercise. It is the basis for your thoughts and actions that come now. It is the basis for your thoughts and actions that affect us. It is a mental framework. And it is good to know perhaps that the mental framework is, you don't have it clear for your mind. It is partly unconscious. In a way you respire the mental framework. It is, I don't know how to express it, but perhaps you know what I mean either. So now you are ready to answer your 4 questions. And after you have answered your 4 questions, you can write your press release. So, just to give another example, for example, you have little kids at home, and you are going to tell them a fairy tale. You have them. You are going to, so before telling them the fairy tale, well, you are already framing, you are imagining, well, what am I going to tell them? And probably your frame will look a little bit like this. The world is friendly, everyone is smiling, is happy. There are flowers, there are trees, There are birds, not in this picture, but even the sun is. That is the frame of your fairy tale for the frame for your fairy tale you are going to tell to your small children. So, with the frame, you are going to answer your questions. Here they are again. And now you may answer your questions. This is not entirely mental anymore. You may do it on your own, but preferably with a colleague. What is your key message of the press release? Who is the target group of who?
It's interesting how titles of articles, be they newspaper or journal articles, can attract a lot of interest in the content. But you know, just like the media guys, one can be very good at naming and then, yeah, I attract you, and then once you're in there, you have to listen to what is in there. Now, we are all aware that there has been a lot of debate around why African countries are seemingly not agreeing on issues of GM. Not only is this debate about Africa, but a lot about developing countries versus developed countries. But not only is it also divided on development basis, levels of development basis, but we know that the US, the EU have also different views on GM technology. But here we just want to look at GM technology as it relates to development, because there are a lot of promises that the technology has, and hence a lot of expectations that we as developing countries would be the ultimate beneficiaries of the technology. Now, I start from reflecting on why we regulate genetic engineering, genetic modified organisms, or you call them LMOs in the protocol. And it's basically for three reasons. First is safety, we have been talking about that all along. Second is efficacy, and the third is public confidence. And this is why perhaps issues such as public awareness are in there, issues like socioeconomic considerations are in there. It's also about creating some public confidence in the technology. We know that most biosafety regulatory systems focus on safety, environmental, food safety, and sorry, I have to take some water. To a lot of suspicion on new technologies, because earlier technologies had shown or had failed them. So there are such things that we sometimes do not look at as perhaps influencing even our own African positions. Are there any issues in our countries that had happened in the past that may have a role to play in how we perceive technologies, more so GE technology? And then the situational context is also about many other issues, like who funds our processes, what conditions do they come in with, because at times we are not necessarily speaking on behalf of our own national needs or national priorities, but because we need an assistance from a certain donor whose position we know. They do not necessarily have to pronounce it to you to say, follow this position. But once I know I'm getting funds from the Greens, the chances I will be speaking like the Greens. So those are the kind of issues that we sometimes overlook. Now, those two authors actually concluded that contrasting euphoria and gloom at global and local levels that accompanied the early developments of biotechnology set the context for the reception of the biotechnology. And they go on to trace certain developments that happened and certain positions that were then, and one of them being the EU position, for example, that I just referred to. Now, some of the things I'm going to say in this presentation are meant to make you talk. So I intend to intrude your to get you on board with the issues that we sometimes do not necessarily analyze. Debate on biotechnology has produced extreme positions, as I've said before. One group says it's a solution to environmental, social, and economic problems. The other group says it's a potential cause of more challenges to the environment, to human health, and the debate has been politicized. There's a lot of social and political issues that have been pulled into the debate. And as that happened, national positions on any technology, including such kind of technology, are very crucial because they either create an enabling environment for exploitation of a technology that has a potential to solve national constraints and challenges, or it actually limits the exploitation of such a technology. Within such extreme social and political challenges and a hot debate around